to another edition of the Goal Line Stand podcast. This is Jackson Caudill. That is Kobe Reed. Kobe, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I feel a little bit betrayed. You got our co-host sitting back there in the windowsill, man. I feel like he's going to take our jobs at some point.
He's going to at some point. We've been looking for, if a lot of podcasts, 3 or 4 hosts. That's our third right there. Oliver's taking over, so our viewership's going to skyrocket now. Welcome back, everybody. If you joined us for the SEC show last week, we appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. We're digging into the Conference of Champions Day. It's ACC time. We're going to dig into all that. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. Do all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. The content's going to keep coming. Conference realignment truly never stops. I didn't think we were going to be leading off with this at this time yesterday. I'm getting my show notes and everything ready. I'm preparing. And then Colorado just decides they want to go back to the old familiar and join the Big 12. I guess, what was your instant reaction? And we'll just dive right into it. Give us your take on it.
Oh, this is huge for somebody like Deion Sanders in that position. It seems like the Pac-12 is just decimating in front of our eyes. Like, it's just not – I don't know what they're going to do with it. Like, if you look at it right now, you lose USC, you lose UCLA, Colorado's gone. We would guess that a team like Oregon would try to find a home somewhere else. Like, that Pac-12 team, that Pac-12 conference looks like another group of 5 conference at this point. Like, there's nobody left that can really do anything. But as far as Colorado going to the Big 12, that's huge. Deion can go there, make his own team, make his own legacy. And right now that conference is going to be up for grabs. You starting with a team like this, what better opportunity do you have just to take a conference and put your foot on its neck and leave it there, So I think this is huge for Colorado. I think it's huge for recruiting. I think it's really going to pay dividends for a conference that's losing big brands like Texas and Oklahoma.
Let me ask you this. If Deion Sanders is not the coach of Colorado, does Colorado get this invite?
Not at all.
I don't think so either.
Not at all.
I was thinking about that yesterday, and I'm like, man, there's been a lot of discussion and bickering, because Colorado's been talking about this for the last few months, and I think they played it right. They've talked about, hey, we're seeing what options are out there. Maybe when the new TV deal gets announced for the Pac-12, we'll evaluate our options in. We've been talking about that new Pac-12 TV deal since, April?
Yeah.
Every time, and it's like, it's coming. It's on the way, and it's just, it never happens. And I don't know when you got to hear about it at some point, but this conference just looks dead in the water right now. The Pac-12, we both grew up with the Pac-10 a little bit, and then when Utah and Colorado came in, it went to 12. And look, Colorado had that one pretty good season. They did go 10-2. I think it was 2016, and they made the Pac-12 title game. But they've been a doormat pretty much since. And we haven't gotten to the Pac-12 yet. I think Deion could be in for a rough debut, but there is a power vacuum in the Big 12 with Oklahoma and Texas going. Like, there's me and you are both high on schools like TCU, Baylor, and stuff in the future. But if Deion recruits how Deion has recruited before, like, Colorado has a chance to be a perennial bowl team there. We'll see how high up they can get, but I don't want to use the word bombshell and just throw it around all the time, but that was surprising, to say the least, a little bit, just that it came right here. And it seems like this conference realignment stuff is never going to stop. The ACC has been Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina. All those have been in dismay for a little while now. And, we got USC, UCLA going to the Big Ten next year, Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC. So everything's changing before our eyes, and Colorado going to the Big 12. That was approved, and it's happening. But I guess let's dig into the ACC, man. Last week, we got to the SEC and the 2-time national champion Georgia Bulldogs, and now we get to the conference that I know best. You might not know best, but this is my conference right here, and it's something.
Preview. You just got done with media days, didn't you? How'd that go?
My first ACC media days, it was a blast. My brother, he helps me out a lot with the site and does a lot of background stuff that people don't really see, and he helped me a ton down there. And big shout out to him. So we went down there, talked to Brent Key, talked to the players. It was, let's see, Monday was Miami, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Syracuse. We saw Dino Babers, Jeff Brom, Mario Cristobal. Miami was, of course, kind of the talk of the meetings and everything, and how can Miami bounce back? And we're going to get into that here in a minute. But it was great hearing from those guys. Fall camp's just around the corner, and it was awesome to be able to experience it. I'm really blessed with what I get to do, and then getting to go out there and do stuff like that. And for all your Georgia Tech news, check out allyellowjackets.com. It's the least you can do for us bringing this great content to you. We'll provide a link below, but we hope you can go check that out. I guess let's start out our show a little bit like last time, talking about the biggest questions we have for the ACC. And I think the first one that we both were talking about leading up to this show is, you look at the ACC odds in sports books, and it's Florida State. Clemson's just behind them. And then there's a big gap. And North Carolina is picked by a lot of people to kind of be that team lurking out there. A lot of people have talked about the schedule for Louisville, and Louisville doesn't play Florida State, Clemson, or North Carolina. So a lot of people are saying, maybe they're not the second best team in the ACC, but if they play their cards right, no pun intended, that they can get to that second place finish and with a really good record. So I'm asking you, is there a legitimate challenger to either of these two teams?
A legitimate challenger? I can't say so, because I don't see anybody's roster matching up well with them. We were talking a little bit before the show. It's hard when you get to that high of a level, like playoff contention level. It's hard if you don't have the roster to match. The schedule can play out. I mean, look at Georgia. Georgia has one of the easier schedules. Granted, it's not their fault, but you combine that schedule with that roster they have, the possibilities seem endless. With a team like Louisville, they don't have a bunch of 4 and 5 stars running around. That's just not them. I like them, and I like how their schedule can play out for them. And as far as making an ACC championship, I think they have the schedule to do it, but do they have the right guys on the roster to make that happen? I'm not so sure they do. Now, a team that does have a talented guy behind center, North Carolina, we harped on their defense all last season. I don't see their defense being much better. We'll dig into that a little bit later in the show. What can that defense do against a team like Jordan Travis? They got potentially the best running back in the ACC. They probably have the best wide receiver core in the ACC. What would a UNC defense do against a team like that? So I don't know if there's any legitimate challenger, but if you have a team like Louisville that plays their cards right, or if somehow Drake May just single-handedly carries that Tar Heel team to an ACC championship again, I don't know if any of those two teams could beat FSU or Clemson.
Yeah, I think you have to. The way it's worded, is there? I think those are the two best rosters by a mile in the ACC. Now, Drake May is that good. If North Carolina's defense gets into top 50 level, it's been bottom of the barrel here lately, and the offense doesn't drag off any, there you go. Louisville's schedule does set up nicely for them, and I'm sure people are tired of hearing it, but in terms of raw talent and 4 or 5 star blue chip talent, Miami's the only team close to those two. If you're talking about just the rest of everybody else, if Tyler Van Dyke's back to the level he was 2 years ago, the offensive line could be one of the best in the ACC, and I think the defense could be salty as well. But I cannot get the visual picture of them in any game last year out of my head. They were just so terrible last year.
Watching that Miami A&M game last year gave me.
Yeah, and we talked about that a million times on the last pod, but I cannot say it enough. When you go back and if you watch that game, it was just bad, and then it kept getting worse. 8 turnovers versus Duke, so Miami's just a huge question mark. But in terms of raw talent, it wouldn't totally shock me to see them win 8 or 9 games. But in terms of just a real challenger, I'm kind of with you on that. I would be kind of surprised if somebody else is in the ACC title game. But we don't want to spoil it. What's the point of having an ACC pod if we're just going to give you the ACC title game in the first 10 minutes? So I'm going to let you lead with this one, because you posed an interesting question in terms of what will Drake May's legacy be. And I'll let you take the lead on this, and I'll kind of back clean up.
I mean, how many times have we seen this? We've seen an elite level quarterback, a first round caliber quarterback. That is what Drake May is. Let's get nothing confused here. He is top 2 quarterback in the country type good. High rated guy coming out of high school. He gets to North Carolina. There's a bunch of transfer talks after last season. Maybe he goes to Alabama where he was committed in high school. Maybe he transfers out. And he said, like, North Carolina is where he wants to stay. That's where he wants his legacy to be.
And
But
props to him for doing that too.
yeah, that the gall to be able to do that, props to him. But what is that going to leave his legacy? Is he just going to be another elite quarterback that is burdened by a horrible defense? He's never going to make it past 10, 11 wins, anything like that. Nothing substantial. No playoff appearance, anything like that. How does that affect his legacy? Like we're not necessarily talking about draft stock. I mean, the kid alone, he's going to be a first round draft pick. There is no doubt about that. But is he just going to be another elite college quarterback that is just burdened by what's surrounding him?
Yeah. So, like, I view this, when we're talking about, say, NFL quarterbacks, we're talking about legacy, a lot of it's defined by rings because if you're a truly great quarterback, you're going to be able to take your team over the top and get rings. I don't necessarily view college quarterbacks like that necessarily because the talent gap in college is just so massive. Like, I thought of Patrick Mahomes as a great college quarterback because of the numbers and he put up. And if you took him off his team, they probably would have won 2 games. He just they were so bad on defense, a lot like how we're talking here. Somebody, like Graham Harrell at Texas Tech won a lot of games there. Probably wasn't never won a national title or anything, but still a great college quarterback. And, look, I don't think North Carolina is winning the ACC this year. Spoiler alert. I don't think they're going to make the playoff. I think overall, though, I do think, him coming back, like, I think that sets a pretty good legacy as far as with Tar Heel fans because Georgia is a very heavy favorite to three-peat this year. If he went to Alabama, guess who's the national championship favorite? Yeah, it's Alabama. If he, Ohio State was another school out there. He goes to Ohio State. They're the national title favorites. That's how good he is. And obviously, Ohio State and Alabama got tons and tons of talent themselves. But how good he is, just he's probably worth 2-3 wins. And like, if here's another way to put it: if he wasn't on North Carolina, are they a bowl team?
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, if their defense doesn't improve, so he means a lot to them. I think his legacy is pretty well set as far as North Carolina goes, and I loved him for because he could have easily made a ton of money, out there because he's worth. If you're talking about just one season of Drake May, that's probably $10 million right there.
Yep, I agree with you.
All right, it's the answer I'm going to take the lead on. It's something that I know a little bit about. I talked to Brent Key a little bit this week, and is he the answer at Georgia Tech? Short term or long term, I guess. Yes, I do think so. Does that mean you're going to get instant results and competing for ACC titles right now? Probably not. I think the recruiting has picked up. They got a big commitment today. Jamison Riggs, 3-star offensive tackle, and he committed over Clemson and Auburn, 2 schools he took visits to, and 2 schools that I thought were in the lead at one point for him. That's a big recruiting win. They're top 25, something that they have not done in a while. Jeff Collins had that one pretty good class, when he had Jahmyr Gibbs and Jeff Sims and those guys. But recruiting has just really dropped off over the past couple of years. And while obviously you got to sign these kids, this is a good start. Now, can the results on the field be better? I think so. Like, you look at the one thing I am worried about is, last year, even though they did win some of those games, some of them weren't overly impressive. Like the Pitt win, a lot of turnovers in that one. That was a little bit fluky, but they beat Duke and North Carolina last year and defensively played really well in those football games. So, look, that was the first time they were competitive against pretty good teams in a while. I mean, they beat 3 9-win teams last year, and I think they're being underrated a little bit. I think people just, think of Georgia Tech in the past few years and just automatically put them at the bottom. And while I'm not saying they're a top 5 team in the ACC, I do think they bring enough intriguing pieces over. And one thing I can tell you, it may not result in a lot of wins. This team is going to play absolutely balls to the walls and hard for Brent Key. Like, that's the one of the main things I took away from media days is that's going to be a tough team. And you already saw that. Like, they were beating Georgia in the first quarter. Like, you can laugh at me and say, like, oh, Georgia didn't care about that game. But I do think there's something to that. They didn't go out there and lay down like they could have. Now, playing hard it's not everything. Like, talent wins out at the end of the day, and the recruiting is going to have to be just as good as it is now. And I think the schedule breaks well for them. So we'll talk more Tech here in just a little bit. But I do think long-term just to be completely honest, I wrote about it that he was not the hire I would have made at the time. But I do think he can work out in the long term. I do think he's done a good job so far. But the results got to be on the field now. Like they have to show up on the field, and they could beat Louisville week 1. That's all I'm saying. I'm not revealing a pick or anything yet, but I think there's a better chance they win that game than a lot of people give them credit for.
Yeah, looking on the outside, looking in, what he's done at Tech, he's changed it. He's changed it for the better already. We saw that real early on into his interim season last year. Like, you saw guys wanting to play hard for him. You saw guys that were nowhere to be seen earlier on in the year. As soon as that coaching change is made, you can see the significant difference in the effort. And I think that all comes with culture. Anytime you hire a new coach, culture is everything. Now he's starting to piece together recruiting classes. He's starting to bring guys in. He's starting to get talent onto the field. And that's basically the theme of the ACC right now. It's, can you put enough talent on the field to make substantial differences? I think he's doing that right now. Are we going to see a 1-year change in Georgia Tech? No. Are we going to see them rattle off 8 or 9 wins this year? Probably not. But do they have the talent on the field that they can make a bowl game? I think so. Are we going to see more wins in the win column this year compared to last year and compared to what we saw with the Jeff Collins era? I definitely think so. I think right now the trajectory of this program, you're seeing them really buy in. You're seeing the fan base really buy in. And the most important thing is the culture around them is changing. The culture in the locker room is changing. If he can keep that up, I definitely think long-term he is the answer at Georgia Tech. Now that he's bringing in these recruiting classes, that's going to raise the ceiling very, very, very much. So I guess my biggest question to you is, what do you see out of Georgia Tech this year that would be considered improvement compared to what you've seen last year and the previous years before that?
To me, it's making a bowl game. Like it's they haven't made one since Paul Johnson's last year in 2018. They were this close last year. There was a couple of just games I think they let get away from them. That Virginia loss, to me, that was inexcusable. They should not have lost that game last year. I could go on and on about that. That was a terrible performance offensively. But I digress. I do think if Zach Pyron doesn't get hurt in the Miami game, I think they win that game. Like, that game was very close in the third quarter, and then turnovers just they come undone. And you're talking, those are 2 possible wins right there. That's a 7-win team. Like that, they would have made a bowl game last year, and I think getting to a bowl game, it should be the goal this year. Like, I know, obviously, coach talk and everything, he's going to say winning every game is the goal, winning every game. But I do think it's good to have season-long goals and saying, hey, we want to be competitive in this rivalry. We want to win this game and that game. And just, taking it one game at a time is a good approach. But making a bowl game would be a huge step for this program. You just don't want to backslide. You don't want to go 3-9 or something, have a worst-case scenario. And you don't want to get blown out in a lot of games either, because the Florida State and Georgia wound up winning their games by double digits, but they were competitive in just about every game they played. Like I said, the Miami game I kind of put an asterisk on because Zach Pyron got hurt, and Miami's offense wasn't doing anything in that game. They got turnovers there when Pyron went out, so I do think that that played a big factor in that game. But we'll dig into more Tech here in a little bit. But let's get to the 5 best non-conference games, and I think there's going to be a little bit of overlap here. I'll just start out. It was a number 5 for me on our SEC list. Clemson and South Carolina. I already talked about it. Go listen to our SEC show from last week. But, how these 2 teams look at the end is Clemson fighting for a playoff spot and trying to stay relevant like they were last year. And where the heck is South Carolina? Because, they're just – I know I picked them 3rd in the East, but to say I feel confident about them would be a little overstated. So I'm interested to see how both those teams are at the end. You go ahead.
I think that game is a little bit higher on my list. Clemson, South Carolina, especially out of what we saw last year with Spencer Rattler and how they took over. I think that game's going to mean a lot. And if South Carolina is what I think they will be this year, me personally, that's going to be a little bit that game's going to hold a little bit more weight than a lot of people think it will. So when the playoff committee comes around and it's time to start choosing, I think that's going to be a good South Carolina team. And I think that if Clemson is really going to want to solidify their spot in the playoff, I think you're going to have to win big against South Carolina. I think that you're really going to have to be out for redemption, be out for blood a little bit. You're going to want to get your revenge. I think that's going to be a huge game. Right there at that number 5 spot, I got same thing I had in that SEC list. I got Miami and A&M. What we see out of Miami, what we saw out of Miami last year, you can't have that. You just can't. Like you said, you dug into it a little bit. Miami's roster is probably the third best roster in the ACC. A&M, they're probably the third or fourth best roster in the SEC, but the difference in roster is absolutely insane to me. You would think that on paper A&M would blow out Miami as of right now, but last year it was like watching paint dry. Like both teams could not get anything going. Both teams' offenses were not efficient by any means. Turnovers everywhere. They couldn't move the ball on third down. I think that game should be a lot bigger, but because we don't know the production we're going to get out of either team, I don't know how heavy that game is going to hold weight. In that 4 spot, I had Clemson and Notre Dame. I think that game is going to be huge this year. Clemson, if they want to rise back to the top of the college football world, which arguably they have been just as much as anybody, including Alabama and Georgia over the last decade. Like whenever you think of top tier teams in college football, Clemson's always right there. I think beating a team like Notre Dame, that's going to do nothing but add to their resume because their schedule already isn't knockdown drag out every week. So you got to win big against a team like Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean both of those games, like Miami A&M is number 3 for me. I had Clemson Notre Dame number 2. Like to me, that could be huge because both teams could be in the playoff. I think Clemson will be in the playoff hunt, but Notre Dame could be as well. And let's not forget, like Clemson was undefeated last year. I think they were number 4 going into a game against a Notre Dame team that just lost to a horrific Stanford team last year. And Notre Dame blew their doors off. Like that was one of the more surprising results of the season to me last year. So Clemson Notre Dame always seem to play good games. I don't know if you remember the Hurricane game, when the rain was coming down, Deshaun Kaiser gets stopped at the goal line. Then, of course, you had the COVID year when Ian Book beat him in South Bend. But those two teams always seem to play good games outside of the ACC title game a couple years ago, which was a blowout. But, man, I'll stick with my theme of just throwing South Carolina and everything. And South Carolina, North Carolina, we just found out this week that's where game day's going.
Yeah, that's huge. Man.
If you ask South Carolina, North Carolina fans, it's because that's the biggest game of the week. If you tell me, 1, yes, it probably is the biggest game on Saturday, and 2, that's not like an accomplishment. Like because the opening week of games is not exactly a world beaten slate that week. So I'm just kind of interested to see because if Spencer Rattler goes out there and throws for like 8 touchdowns and 600 yards. The questions about North Carolina's defense are only going to get louder. So that's a chance to show that your defense, if their defense comes out and plays well, I'm not going to sit here and say like they're playoff contenders, but South Carolina can score. Like it's not like they're Iowa. So I think there's a chance for both those teams to prove something. Man, there's only one game on my list we hadn't hit, and I'm sure it's on yours as well. Is there another game besides the obvious one that you want to touch on, but that you hadn't revealed yet?
No, and I think we all know what's coming next. It is that FSU LSU game in week 1. This is going to be the most crucial game of the year, not just for LSU, not just for Florida State, probably for the playoff committee. They're going to look back on this because we don't know what's going to come out of the Big Ten. We know we have Michigan there, Ohio State. We don't exactly know what they're going to be with a new quarterback, but we know that they have a stable of wide receivers. They have a stable of running backs. Penn State is on the rise. We know Georgia, they're favored to three-peat this year. We don't know what Alabama's going to be with their quarterback situation. Texas is just sitting there. Everybody's just waiting on them to make an appearance. USC, Oregon, Washington, all them out in the Pac-12, of course. They're going to look back on this game whenever they're selecting the playoff teams, and this is going to be monumental. Like, it is that good of a game. You have 2 of the best teams, 2 top 10 teams in the country. And then not only that, you got 2 Heisman contending quarterbacks right here. Like, I think Jordan Travis could very well win the Heisman with the stable of receivers he has right now. They've put in work in the transfer portal. They've surrounded him with wide receivers that they can win with, plus running backs. Jaden Daniels, you really like their wide receiver room. You think they have some of the best in the country, not just the SEC. Can he take that next step as a passer? And really win them games, because we saw it last year. It was a little bit of a dogfight for Jaden Daniels. He was really just having to make plays on his own. He was having to convert on third down with his legs. Is that going to be the case this year, or is he going to rely on his wide receivers a little bit more? But looking at the end of the season, they're going to look back at this week 1 and they're going to say this game could really decide that third or fourth spot in the playoff.
Yeah, I can't really add much more to it than that. I talked a lot about it on last week's episode, but that game, it is the game of the week. That it's one of the games of the year, and you're already getting it week 1. You're talking about one of the favorites for the SEC, the favorite in the ACC.
Why they would put it on a Sunday, I couldn't tell you.
Well, to be fair, they have had a Sunday night primetime game for a long time. Like it's been quite a while now. I don't think we've ever had a Sunday game of this caliber necessarily. Yeah. I'm super excited for that game. All right, from non-conference to conference, and look, I think we're gonna have some overlap, but I'll kick it off with more of an underrated game, and that's NC State and Louisville. Like, I think those are two teams that I think could, if one of FSU or Clemson disappoints, because I think that's also what it's going to take for somebody else in the ACC to kind of rise up and challenge and get in the spot. Is one of those two teams got to disappoint, but I think it's one of those two possibly. Louisville, much as I don't want to harp too much on the easy schedule thing. It's been talked about a lot. NC State was your pick to win the ACC and go to the playoff last year. Kind of going under an offensive renaissance a little bit with Brendan Armstrong coming in, Robert and I as the new OC, and getting rid of whatever the heck they were running last season. But, man, I think either one of those two teams I think could be a wild card to pull some upsets over FSU or Clemson, and I'm interested to see how that game goes.
Yeah, I had that game on my list. I think Louisville is really a dark horse to win the ACC this year, and it does tie in the schedule, but it's much more than just the level of competition. They're not going to be in knockdown dragouts every week. They can keep guys healthy. They can rotate guys in. They can get experience for younger guys. I think that's going to be huge for them. And NC State, they're kind of just changing their whole dynamic as an offense and as a team. I think this game could really pay dividends in the ACC. I think we're going to get a very, very, very high-class game. Moving on to my next game, I had North Carolina and NC State. I think it's the same kind of caliber game. It seems like a little bit of a trend here that NC State's being mentioned a lot. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, are you talking about just as far as Louisville being mentioned more than NC State?
No, I mean, like, because we sent each other our lists for best conference games in the ACC this year, and both of us had NC State there a couple of times. Is NC State going to be that formidable this year, or do you think just the way the schedules play out that
I think it is the way that just the schedules play out, and I think that they're a team that always seems to pull a couple upsets. They never seem to get over the hump and everything, but they always seem to be right there, and I just feel like there's a lot of upset potential with NC State. Like that was my thing, and I think if they win a couple of these swing games, like they play both Louisville and Miami, they win both of those, and they obviously NC State or North Carolina, excuse me. You win some of those, like you could find yourself finishing third in the conference, just seeing how some things break down. So I just think they're an intriguing team overall, and I didn't think as much of them last year, but I'm kind of in on them this year. But
they broke my heart last year. I can't, man.
I'll go with a little bit of a pick that I know nobody else in the world would have. I'm gonna say North Carolina and Georgia Tech, just for the reason that Georgia Tech has a 2-game win streak over North Carolina. I know North Carolina fans know that, but North Carolina has come in there highly ranked both times, and Georgia Tech's gotten the best of them. I'm just kind of seeing that's also a homecoming game for Georgia Tech in Atlanta this year on October 28th. So I'm just really fascinated to see where both teams are at that point, because really after South Carolina, North Carolina has what appears to be kind of a little bit of a soft schedule. And, can they avoid getting upset by Tech again? And what is Georgia Tech's record by that time? Because, that game, if North Carolina's defense isn't improved, Georgia Tech can win that game. It was the same thing last time. Georgia Tech walked in there with a third-string quarterback and put up 20-plus points on them. Yeah. So I know nobody else is going to have that on there, but I do think that game has more storylines than you might think.
Oh, I definitely agree. And that would be huge for Brent Key going into his first official year as the head coach. If he can keep this win streak against UNC, that's kind of going to put the rest of the league on notice. You know what I mean? And the ACC, like Georgia Tech's here to play. Like they look at UNC as a top 3 team in the conference. If Georgia Tech can win that game, that's monumental for them as a program and them as a culture. Another game I had on there was Miami and Clemson. I think if Miami is going to have any sort of identity, they're going to have to show it against Clemson. We all know how good Clemson's going to be. We don't have to keep reiterating that. But if Miami, the blue chip school that they are, the blue chip program that they are, if they're going to rise back to the top, I think that starts with winning games or at least looking formidable in games like playing at Clemson.
Yeah, I didn't have that on there just for the simple fact is Clemson has owned Miami. They have blown out Miami for the past few times I played them. I'm just going to have to see it out of Miami for me. I did have Clemson in my next game, but it's North Carolina at Clemson. I think this is such a huge game. It's the second to last game of the year. Like, we're going to really know if this could be for a spot in the ACC championship game. North Carolina doesn't play Florida State this season. Clemson is kind of by de facto their toughest game. And you know what? It is in Clemson. That's going to be a tough place to play, and it's going to, but if they can win that game, there's certainly a chance North Carolina's in the ACC championship.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if Drake May can go out and put on a performance, that's the only way they're going to be able to win this game. It's going to have to be a shootout. You're going to have to bank on Clemson's defense being tired. You're going to have to play fast. You're going to have to keep those guys on the oxygen on the sidelines. That's the only way North Carolina can win that. But like we said, North Carolina is a top 3 team in the ACC this year, I personally think. If North Carolina is going to overcome having a rough defense, it's going to take a performance of a lifetime from Drake May to win against a team like Clemson.
You'll probably laugh at me for having this on here, but number 2 to me, I know you had Miami Clemson. I've got Miami Florida State. To me, the rivalry aspect bumps it up a little bit, and it's Florida State's last conference game of the year. Like they have North Alabama and Florida to close the year out, so we'll already kind of know their fate as far as ACC title goes. Maybe they need to win this game, and maybe if Miami's not in position to get in the ACC title game, what if they spoil it for Florida State? And what if North Carolina or Clemson gets in, or somebody else gets in because of this? It's a home game. Like Florida State should be favored heavily, but who knows if Miami does improve, by November, they should be clicking theoretically if they don't peak too soon. So I do think that's probably, once you get past LSU and Clemson, which are both in September, it's hard to find teams where Florida State may really struggle. If they overlook Miami too much at home like that, it could get a little dicey.
I like that. And I think the rivalry aspect, like there's so many things that could happen, especially right there at the end of the year. We've seen it with Auburn and Alabama plenty of times. Alabama looking like they could have the best team in program history. And then here comes Auburn, 3, 4, 5 loss team, just looking to ruin their season. Like that's their Super Bowl. That's how Miami is going to view that game. That is their Super Bowl. If FSU is anything that we think they're going to be this year and they're on the trajectory to make the playoff, nothing would make Miami happier than keeping them from doing that. Let me ask you this, though. If Florida State is undefeated by chance and a 4 or 5 loss Miami team ends up beating them, will it depend on the fashion that they lose? How would that affect a team like Florida State?
Are you saying that's their only loss all season?
Yeah.
They win the ACC title and everything.
Yeah.
They probably get in. Just that's what we were just talking about earlier with the Florida State LSU game. That's where that game just comes in handy. If LSU, as long as that LSU don't go out there go 7-5 or something, like if LSU goes 10-2 or if they win the SEC West, that's a huge win. Plus, you're already talking. You have a road win at Clemson. Yeah. So I probably, I know we love hypotheticals, but I think that's a probably. I don't know if you have another game on your list besides, again, the obvious choice here.
It is Clemson and Florida State. I mean, that's the only other game notable for this conference this year. This could really be the conference decider.
First and 2 matchups.
Yeah. I'm very interested in this game. I think the biggest storyline for me personally is I want to see Cade Klubnik. I want to see if he can rise to the occasion in his first year as a starter. He's going to be facing a very good Florida State defense. He's going to probably have one of the better pass rushers in the country, rushing at him all game long. Is his wide receivers going to step up and make plays for him? Is he going to be able to be efficient, not take a lot of sacks, not turn the ball over? I think that could really be a staple point in his career, in his early career at Clemson.
Yep. I mean, that game's just going to be massive. It's just going to be. And if whoever wins that game is going to be the favorite in the ACC the rest of the way. And again, like I said, it could be the first of two matchups. And you want to, like, it's weird to say Florida State has not won that game since 2014.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. Like, you think that was kind of it's been the premier game in the ACC for a long time now. But
Yeah.
Florida State, they've not been able to hold up their end of the bargain. So I guess let's get into breaking down each teams in kind of the order that we think they'll finish. We're going to go from who we think is going to finish last all the way to the top, and just kind of give our breakdowns, give our win totals picks. We're going to try to get as much about every team as we can. But I'll start at number 14. To me, this was a layup decision. I hate what happened to them last year. Extremely tragic, but Virginia is going to be bad this year. I think they're probably going to be the worst team in the Power Five, if I had to say so. Worse than Vanderbilt.
Oh, wow.
Worse, yeah. I just, it used to be, Kansas used to dominate that conversation, but those days are over, man. Those days are long over.
America's team is back on top. Let's be real.
We're party like it's 2007. So, anyway, I just don't love what this offense. I don't love it. The transfers they've taken and the transfers they've lost. Like Brennan Armstrong went from one of the most explosive passers in the country to barely recognizable in that offense. Like, he did not. I was there watching them when they came and played Georgia Tech in Atlanta last year, and it just didn't look like the same quarterback. And you had some of the best weapons in the ACC, and they just couldn't do anything with it. Now, I'll say this: their defense actually could be pretty good. For I filled out my All ACC ballot this week, and I did have Chico Bennett as my first team edge rusher along with Jared Verse. Like, he's a really good player, an NFL caliber player. I think their front seven's actually decent. Their offense could just be like bottom third of the country. It could just be really bad. And, win total is the lowest in the ACC at 3.5. They open with a neutral site clash against Tennessee. That's most definitely a loss. Like, they're 28-point dogs in that game. I truly think they could lose to James Madison week 2. I know James Madison's one of the favorites to win the Sun Belt. I know you pay attention, but I don't know if most people know that was one of the highest scoring teams in the country last year.
Yeah.
Madison put up a lot of points. And, we talk about teams, Super Bowls and everything, what games teams circled. This will be circled for James Madison. That's huge because obviously they're a program from the state of Virginia. Knocking off, when they are able to knock off Virginia Tech, it may not mean much to me or you. It means the world to them. They're going to have that game circled, and I don't know if Virginia is going to win that game, to be perfectly honest with you. Then they go to Maryland. That looks like a loss. NC State at home, at Boston College, William and Mary, bye week, at North Carolina, at Miami, Georgia Tech at home, at Louisville, Duke and Virginia Tech at home. William and Mary is the only game, like, I think's a lock. Now, there's other games I think they can win, like Boston College, I think they can win. Virginia Tech, I think they could win, just because I don't really have the highest opinions of those teams, as we're going to figure out. Georgia Tech, I don't think is an automatic loss. Like, they could win that game. It's at home, so give me the under, though. I just think that when I look at a schedule and I only see one win that I feel fully confident in, that's just the under for me. I just don't know where 2 more wins are coming, or 3 more wins are coming. Excuse me. They got to get to 4 if you want to cash this over. I don't see it.
I mean, offensively, I think you've hit every point. There's not much to expect here. Let me ask you this, though: who averages more points throughout the season on offense, Iowa or Virginia?
Iowa. That's how low of opinion I have of Virginia's offense.
I was hoping you'd say that, but I mean, if you look at what they had going last year, I mean, they quietly held the teams they played last year on their schedule to only like 4.9 yards per play. Like,
defense is sneaky good.
Yeah, their defense is quality. Like you said, their front seven is good. They're not too shabby, but when you don't have any semblance of an offense together, plus you lose your quarterback, and I think they only have one returning starter on their offensive line, you lose your quality wide receivers last year. That's going to be tough. I don't know what more you can do with that. I don't think anybody has much expectations of Virginia. I think we're all in unison there, putting them last.
Also, I don't think because of 2 bad years, I think they're going to give Tony Elliott time. I don't see him being on. Like, I know some people think if he goes like 1-11 this year, is he on the hot seat? I don't think so. I think they're going to give him plenty enough time. I'm not reporting anything, but I do think they're going to give him ample amount of opportunity to kind of build this thing in his own way. So we'll see that. Was Virginia your number 14 as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll let you lead off with number 13.
At number 13, I have Boston College. A little bit along the same lines. I don't know what we're going to expect from them offensively. They got Emmett Morehead coming back as quarterback. I think he's going to be really, really good for them. But I don't know what identity you're going to get out of that offense. Defensively, we've seen decent defenses from them in the last couple years, but I don't know if they're going to be able to stop anybody that's any good in the ACC this year. And if you can't stop a team from score points, you can't outscore them. What more can you do? So I got them finishing second to last in the ACC.
So I've got them finishing 12th. And after thinking and reading a little bit, this might be a hot take. I do think there's a chance they finish a little higher, and I'll explain that. Last year, they had basically all their offensive linemen got hurt. They had defensive linemen playing offensive line. It's how bad they were hurt on that side of the ball. Now, they should be better on that. I think their receiver room could be pretty good, even without Zay Flowers. I know that sounds insane, but Ryan O'Keefe's a transfer from UCF. He was pretty good there. Like, he put up numbers at UCF. It's not like he's somebody that's never played. I'm trying to my opinions on Phil Dracovic were always mixed. I think he was a little overrated, but I think he was solid. But now he's at Pitt, so Emmett Morehead's almost certainly going to be the starting quarterback there. Jeff Hafley was a defensive guy at Ohio State. He has never been able to figure it out on that side of the ball. That's what kind of worries me. But their schedule is also not just – their win total is set at 5.5. Northern Illinois to start the season, that's probably a win. Holy Cross is probably a win. Florida State at home, like, you're probably going to lose that game. At Louisville, Virginia, at Army, bye week, at Georgia Tech, UConn homecoming, at Syracuse, Virginia Tech, at Pitt, Miami. There's no Clemson, no NC State.
I'll say it's not the gauntlet you think it would be.
It's really not, and that's why give me the over just slightly. I just think the schedule is just there enough, like I feel comfortable in them winning Northern Illinois, Holy Cross, Army, and UConn. I know UConn made a bowl game last year, but come on. Like, that's 4 wins for you right there. They also get to play Virginia. Syracuse is a winnable game. Virginia Tech's a winnable game. And Georgia Tech, I think, is a winnable game. Like, that, there is a path to 7 wins there. It's not likely. I'm not saying they're going to win 7 games. And I picked them 12th just because I don't have a lot of faith in their defense. But I think their offense is kind of sneaky. Like, they're the opposite of Virginia. The defense sucks, but their offense might be all right.
Well, moving forward, who do you got right there at 13?
Virginia Tech. This is like bad. I like the state of Virginia is just giving me bad vibes right now. Like, there's going to be a quarterback competition. Grant Wells is back. He was transferred in from Marshall last year. Didn't play all that well, so they got Kyron Drones to transfer him from Baylor.
Yeah.
A lot like Virginia. Virginia Tech's got some solid receivers, and I think their offensive line play should be better, but running game is quarterback is a big question mark to me. And for a defensive coach, Brent Pry their defense wasn't very good last year, and that team just kind of seemed to, I won't say quit, but they were not competitive a little bit down the stretch. It's Blacksburg, Virginia, is a feared place to play, and it just wasn't last year. So they start off the season with Old Dominion, and their win total is at 5.5. Old Dominion's beaten them before like that. That's what really did Justin Fuente in there a couple times. Didn't they beat them last year if I'm not mistaken.
And you might be right.
Yeah, they did. They started off the season by beating Virginia Tech. So obviously that's Virginia Tech. I don't think is going to be taking them lightly, and they'll probably win that game. But you never know. Purdue at home. I don't know about Purdue, so I think given that at home, I think that can be a Virginia Tech win. At Rutgers, at Marshall, Pitt, at Florida State, Wake Forest homecoming, bye week, Syracuse, at Louisville, at Boston College, NC State, and then, of course, the rivalry with Virginia. Again, because the ACC is just so – you have 2 really good teams, and then it's a lot of question marks. When you don't have to play Clemson and you only get Florida State, there is room, if you win all those games against some of the other teams to get to a bowl game. But I'm on the under 5.5 for Virginia Tech.
I mean, we're kind of right there in the same boat. I had them finishing right there at 11, so not much higher, but also I think our expectations are almost the same. Brent Pry is really going to have to answer a lot of those questions he has on that defense, especially at linebacker and defensive end. I think in their secondary, they got a good set of corners that they could rely on. But if you can't stop the run or rush the passer, I mean, there's only so much you can do there. Like you said, the state of Virginia is just in shambles right now. I don't see anything coming out of Virginia Tech.
I don't either. My number 12 was Boston College. So who is your number 12?
At number 12, I did have Georgia Tech.
Okay.
Now, with that being said, I do think very highly of Georgia Tech, and I'm not just saying that because Jackson told me to. I think they're trending upwards, but also I do think they still have a lot of work to do. I think when you get a new play caller in there, you're going to have to hit certain grooves. You're going to have to get in your rhythm as an offense. You're going to have to really stand firm in your identity. Defensively, I think that if we can get the same effort we got from them defensively towards the end of last year, I think that this defense could be very, very good. But with that being said, this isn't going to be a overnight change. This isn't going to change over the season. You can't really expect much, but all you can ask for is improvement.
The win total's at 4.5. Smash it.
Smash
it over. Smash that over. I'll take the floor here and just I really do like this over, even if I wasn't covering this team. I do think their schedule is manageable enough to where the over is very attainable. Look, the quarterback battle is going to define the fall camp. Haynes King transferring in from Texas A&M, Zach Pyron, who played well as a freshman last year. He was kind of thrown to the fire a little bit against Florida State, and obviously that game didn't go well. But he showed some things, and especially in that game against Virginia Tech, like as a true freshman coming back on the road in your second road start, and like I said, he was not playing bad against Miami. And once he went out, that offense just really fell flat, and they lost that game. You know, bringing Trey Cooley over from Louisville I think he's going to get plenty of carries at running back. I don't think you have a Jahmyr Gibbs or a high-level talent at running back, but I think between him, Dante Smith, and I do think there's a couple of youngsters, either Jamie Felix or true freshman Evan Dickens. I think they can make a difference. I think it's going to be a running back by committee approach this year. Like I said, I don't think there's a superstar talent. That's not a slight at anyone. I just don't think you have a first-round pick there. The wide receivers, man, this is a group that gets me excited. And
very excited about Christian Leary. I cannot wait. I wish him the best.
You're a Christian Leary fan. You were all over me when he came here. Between him, Dominic Blaylock coming over from Georgia, Chase Lane coming over from Texas A&M, Abdul Janae coming over from Duquesne. I also hope I pronounced his name right. Yeah. Along with, I think Malik Rutherford is in for a big season. You know, he's not the biggest guy at 5'9", 155. But I think the way they used him in the spring game, I think he's going to be a guy that gets touches in multiple ways. DJ Moore and Avery Boyd are two guys that also showed out in the spring game catching touchdowns. DJ Moore made plenty of big plays. Avery Boyd made a couple in the red zone. They're probably going to be your outside.
The best wide receiver room Georgia Tech's had?
Potentially. Some of it's just potentially right now because, just being devil's advocate. Blaylock's had injury trouble. Chase Lane was banged up a little bit at Texas A&M. As talented as Christian Leary is, he hasn't produced yet.
Yeah.
And, coming from Duquesne, there's going to be some challenges coming up playing in the ACC. And these other guys they've been here, but they haven't produced enough yet. But I think Rutherford showed towards the end of last season he could be he was, I think, one of the leading receivers in that North Carolina game. Now, the offensive line is going to be make or break for the offense. Yeah. It was not good last year. I'm not even going to try to sit here and say any different. It was really, really bad last year. To be fair, they were young. Like Corey Robinson was a redshirt freshman transfer from Kansas. Joe Fusile, that was his first season starting. Weston Franklin, it was his first season starting full time. Jordan Williams had played before, but still, he went from right tackle, moved inside to right guard a little bit. With everybody coming back, you would expect improvement. But it's going to have to be pretty substantial because if it's the same level of play last year on the offensive line, you're just not going to get anything. Like, you're not going to get anywhere on offense. And Buster Faulkner's a guy, I saw him coach a little bit in the spring and, seeing him out there. I think that was a good hire. I think that he has a lot to prove, of course, like all these new coaches do. But he used a lot of different formations and moved guys around. I think that's going to get him excited. And just going over to the defensive side of the ball, I'll start in the secondary where I think the future is really bright. Look, I think – Lamiles Brooks is one of, if not the best safety in the ACC. I think he's a potential first-round pick. Losing Zamari Walton at corner hurts. You lose him to Ole Miss. But you bring back Miles Sims, who I think is criminally underrated. Clayton Powell-Lee and Jalen King are both back at safeties. If they can figure out that other corner spot, I think it can really bode well for them in terms of like really rounding that secondary out and everything. You got to replace Charlie Thomas and Ace Ely at linebacker. That's not easy, replacing 200 tackle guys. But you bring in Andre White from Texas A&M, Braylon Oliver from Minnesota. Trenilius Tatum is really going to step in there in a role there, I think. I'm really excited to watch Andre White. He wasn't available in the spring game to play, but he was a guy that when he was on the field at A&M, he did make havoc plays. So there's that. And then just getting to the D-line, there's a lot of experience there, but nobody is really broken out yet, especially on the edge, and you're replacing Keon White. When you're replacing a guy that's that talented, goes in the second round, like that's never easy. But there are guys capable there, and I'm really excited about the interior. I think they've got some capable guys there, and then Gavin Stewart's back at kicker. Everybody wants me to talk about the kicker, so there you go. I got the over. Look, I think South Carolina State and Bowling Green are wins to me. If you can beat Boston College, Virginia, and Syracuse, there's 5 right there. Yep. Look, there's only 3 games on this schedule I don't think they can win. They're not beating Georgia, they're not beating Clemson, and they're not beating Ole Miss on the road, I don't think. Yeah. So then it becomes, okay, can you get 1 or 2 of Louisville, Miami, North Carolina?
Which I think is very possible for them.
That's the thing, like that, they're only 8-point dogs to Louisville in that game. They've beaten North Carolina 2 straight years. I don't know what to expect from Miami. So, there is chance there that they could pick off one of those teams. And then of course the road trip to Wake Forest. I think, look, Wake Forest is a good program. And it's on the road. Getting them early to me is a key though. Like it really is. Like they're replacing Sam Hartman, and I know Griffiths has started before there, but I think there's a chance they can get that game. So long story short, hit that over. They're going to a bowl game. Clip this. Old takes me, whatever, if it doesn't happen, but whatever. I do think that Georgia Tech goes to a bowl game. I think the offense is going to be improved. I think the defense is going to stay at a consistent level. I think this team hits the over.
I agree.
Well, they were my number 10. So you want me to hit my number 11? My number 11 was Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
I'm obviously not going to be as long.
I had them at my number 10, so we can dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, they're losing a lot. Sean Tucker, he was really, really good. Like, I was shocked he didn't get drafted. That's how good he was. Like, he was one of the best running backs in the ACC. Look, Aronde Gadsden, he was my first team tight end. Like, I voted him this week. They're also losing other guys at receiver, though, too, and losing a lot on defense. Like, that secondary lost a lot via the transfer portal. So I think it's going to be an uphill battle to get back to a bowl game, because we've seen when Syracuse is, they won 10 games in 2018 and then they cratered for a couple of years, and then they got back. They started 6-0 last year and then kind of tailed off as the year went on. But I like Dino Babers. I think he's a good coach. Syracuse is just a really tough place to win. Their win totals at 6.5. I'm going under there.
6.5. I'm gonna hit that under, just simply because offensively, I don't know what they're gonna get, because Garrett Schrader, he's sidelined. He had that injury in the spring. Replacing the productivity of Sean Tucker, nobody expected him to do what he did, so that's going to be hard to do. I have a little bit of faith in this defense. They're replacing a studded linebacker, but I think in the back end and in that secondary, I think it could be a strength for this team. But with that being said, I don't expect too much from them. I know they have eight returning starters on that defense. I think that's really going to be a vocal point on that team. But I don't think they can make enough strides to really just shift momentum in the ACC.
Yeah, and I think you want to hear, like, I think they may be the only ACC team that has a stretch like this. All right, okay, to start the year, it's fairly easy. It's manageable. You get Colgate to open the season. That's probably a win. Western Michigan's probably a win. At Purdue, I'm kind of interested to see what they look like this year. Then they get Army, but then this, Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, all in a row. What do they look like on the other side of 3 probable losses? Especially North Carolina and Florida State are on the road too. Yeah. Now, to be fair, they have, weirdly enough, been a thorn in Clemson's side before, so maybe there. And then, when they get off that bye week after that, at Virginia Tech, Boston College, Pitt in Yankee Stadium. I wish we'd quit playing football and baseball stadiums, but anyway. And then they come to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech, and then they finish the year with Wake Forest. So there is some chance for a back half schedule, but I think 6-6 is more likely than 7-5.
I agree. I'm taking the under on that one.
All right, we've done 10 through 14, and I think those are most people's 10 through 14.
Yeah.
Who's number 9 for you?
Looking at my list at number 9, go ahead and give me Wake Forest.
Same.
Sam Hartman's gone. I don't think we need to really address the loss that is, but it is still Wake Forest. I think that they can scrounge up enough to be able to knock off some wins. What's their over under for the year?
Their over under right now, I believe, is at 6.5. There's so many ACC teams right around that 6.5 mark.
Yeah. The only bad thing is that scares me is they did give up 28 points per game last year.
And I don't think that's getting better.
I don't either. And I don't know how many games you can win if your defense is giving that up. I think they're really going to have to figure out their defense. I think they're going to have to figure out quarterback now that Sam Hartman's gone. You're not going to get the same production that he has given you. I like them right there at number 9, but I can't see them finishing any higher, but I can definitely see them finishing lower.
Yeah, the defense just gives me pause, and that's why I said Georgia Tech can go up there and win that game. Like, if their offense is capable enough, like, they can go there and score points. I still think their receivers are pretty good. You do lose A.T. Perry, but Jamal Banks is pretty good. Another first-team All-ACC guy had, like, he's a – Wake Forest, like, Dave Clawson's got Wake Forest to the point where, like, receiver-wise and quarterback-wise, I just expect them to develop players. Like, he runs a really good program at a place that's extremely hard to win. Like, I know they've won 8-9 games here for the last few years, but that's not normal at Wake Forest. Like, he's got them to consistently get into a bowl game, which is, to me, what you can ask for. You know, they do, you know, you have at Clemson, they do play both Florida State, and they got to go on the road to Notre Dame. But, you know, Elon, Vanderbilt, at Old Dominion. I have already said Vanderbilt's going to upset them, so that kind of tells you what I think about Wake Forest as a whole. Like, give me the under on them. I just defensively, they scare me, and if you take even a small step back on offense, that could be really detrimental to you. All right, you ready for a hot take?
Give it to me.
I'm tired of hearing about Duke finishing in the top 3 or 4 of the ACC.
That's a hot take.
Look, they're and I think Vegas agrees with me. Their win total is only at 6.5. I heard a conversation on ACC Network yesterday about it. Is this team a dark horse to get to Charlotte? And the answer is no. They are not going to Charlotte. Like, me and you talked about this before the show. When teams overachieve, like Duke was at 3.5 as a win total last year. They won 9 games. They were a pretty solid team last year. They won a lot of close games, and their turnover differential was huge. They did take a step forward on defense, but also, like, they got lucky with a lot of turnovers. They got 8 in one game against Miami. I still think this is going to be a team that fights hard every week. Like, Mike Elko got them to do that. And, you know, he was rewarded with a contract extension, if I'm not mistaken, just a couple of days ago for it.
Yeah.
And I think Riley Leonard's a pretty good ACC quarterback. But I just don't know where – Duke is not a program that has another gear. Like, they can win 8-9 games maybe in a year, but they're not all of a sudden going to shift and win 10 or 11. It's just not going to happen. And, you know – starting off the year at home against Clemson, I think that's a loss. Then they do run into some likely wins with Lafayette, Northwestern, who's probably going to be really bad this year for obvious reasons. At UConn, Notre Dame at home, I don't think they win that game. NC State at home, I don't think they win that one. Road trips to Florida State, Louisville, probably not. They get Wake Forest at home, like that's obviously a winnable game. At North Carolina, if North Carolina's defense isn't any better, like they pushed them to the limit last year. And then at Virginia and then Pitt. Like, I got them going under this year, 6.5. Like, I just think they're going to take – they're not going to get as many turnovers this year, and they can take a step back on offense.
I'm a little bit higher, and by a little bit, I mean a lot of bit higher on Duke. I got them finishing in my top 5. I'll dig into that a little bit more when we get there. I just think the glaring point that you really didn't elaborate on, they got like 8 or 9 starters coming back on that offense. You got a lot of experience. Yeah, but I think that they can sample enough together to at least hit their over. I mean, you got to give them that. I think they can definitely hit their over. Will they get 8 wins? That might be a stretch. I think they can get 7 though.
Like, they're going to be an underdog in a lot of these games, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be totally wrong here, but I feel kind of confident in this one.
At number 8 though, I did have Pitt. I don't know what we're going to expect from Pitt. But they're bringing back 6 starters on offense. I think that if some way, somehow, they can amp up their quarterback production. Like, I know it's hard whenever you see Kenny Pickett do what he did and you see that drop off that they had last year. If they can have a quarterback at least produce in that offense, I think that they could be a real decent team this year.
I hate because I've got them 7th. I
Yeah.
hate picking them that low because I have a ton. I hate the way he runs his offense. Pat Narduzzi's a really good coach. Like, I mean, he won an ACC title at Pitt just 2 years ago, out of nowhere, and with like a legitimately good team. It wasn't like they went 8-4 and fluked into it. That team won 11 games.
Yeah.
Like, that was a really good team, and I hate their offense. I hate it. But Phil Dracovic could be a pretty good quarterback. He's kind of more off his talent right now. Like, I don't know if you have a personal opinion on him when he was at Boston College or not.
Yeah.
They lose a lot on defense. You know, Kalijah Cansey was a first-round player. Servassier Dennis was a really good linebacker. But Pitt's one of those, they just seem to turn out good defenses. Like we talked about with Wake Forest, I trust them to turn out offense. Pitt's kind of the opposite. Like, they're going to be good on defense, and they have a chance to be, I think, a sleeper in this league. Like, they start out with I think they could be 3-0, like Wofford, Cincinnati, at West Virginia. I both think me and you don't think West Virginia is going to be all that good this year, so that there's that. North Carolina at home, at Virginia Tech, bye week. Louisville, at Wake Forest, at Notre Dame, Florida State, Syracuse, Boston College, at Duke. So they do avoid Clemson. They do have to play Florida State. Actually, that's a very, very, very tricky game for Florida State that they need to be careful of. Yeah. It's on the road at Pitt, and it's the week before the Miami game. Like, you don't want to get caught ahead looking to your rival, especially if Miami overachieves and, like, it could be a top 15 matchup maybe. People have gone on the road to Pitt and lost in upsets before. So that's if there's an upset spot for Florida State, to me, it's right there. That was my number 7. So,
my number 7, I had Miami. I'm just not that high on Miami. I'm glad you can get Tyler Van Dyke back, but this offense only averaged 23.6 points per game last year. They got to get some sort of identity on offense. I know they bulked up their offensive line a little bit, especially in the recruiting class. Defensively, they're really going to have to step up. They're going to be replacing cornerbacks DJ Ivey and Tyreek Stevenson. I think that's going to be huge for them. If they can figure that out, they got to build their foundation as a defense. They got to be one of those hard-nosed Miami defenses if they're going to have any success this year, because I do think they have some liabilities on offense. I don't know how good they're going to be offensively.
Yeah, I mean, they already replaced both coordinators. I mean, Mark Cristobal's only been there a year, and you get Shannon Dawson coming in on offense, Lance Guidry coming in on defense. I actually really do like their offensive line. Like, Matt Lee, I don't know if people know this, when he was at UCF, he was the highest graded center in the country on PFF. Now, you can disagree with PFF if you want to, but he was there. Javion Cohen coming in from Alabama. Yeah. Was he a big part of that offense? Are you sad to see him go, or are you just like, he was good, but, whatever?
I do think that was a huge loss for Alabama. I think Alabama can replace him a little bit just off their recruiting talent alone. But I think Cohen could go start at guard for any other team in the country.
Yeah, and then Zion Nelson, you see a lot mocked in first rounds of drafts. I don't really get that a lot, but whatever. And then there's been a lot of talk about Francisco Mauigoa, who was the number 1 offensive tackle in the country coming out of high school, starting there. I think they're going to be able to run the ball better. I don't know that they have a stud at running back, whether you're going to have a dominant running game. I had Miami finishing 5th, and to me, the reason I'm buying it, I'm okay. Let me rephrase it. I'm not buying it on Miami, but the reason I think they could still finish in the top 4 or 5 is their defense. I mean, Cam Kitchens was a first-team All-American at safety. Leonard Taylor is a possible first-round pick. Akeem Mesidor is good. Like, Miami had 37 sacks last year. They gave up a lot of big plays on defense, but now with Kevin Steele gone, like, I don't know if it was just him or what that was. Cornerback is a position that scares me for Miami, but I do think they got better at linebacker. I don't know. They're over under win totals at 7.5, and they have a challenging schedule for somebody that's in the ACC. Miami, Ohio should be a win, but Texas A&M at home, they're going to be underdogs in. Then you get Bethune-Cookman and Temple. They should win both of those.
Should win.
Should.
Shout out to Middle Tennessee.
Then you get Georgia Tech at home, at North Carolina, Clemson at home, Virginia. It's like Louisville, Florida State, NC State, and then a Black Friday game on the road at Boston College. That could be weird because of the weather, but 7.5, I'll lean over slightly just because I do think in terms of talent, Miami can just out talent a lot of the teams they play, but I don't think it's going to be an easy over by any means.
Yeah.
I'll get to my number 6 right here, Louisville. And I think they're a team that can be much
number
higher.
6.
But if you just talk to me like in terms of roster and everything, I don't think they're an upper tier roster in the ACC.
Yeah.
Like, I think getting Jake Plummer in, he played for Jeff Brom at Louisville. I think he's going to step in pretty seamlessly. They just lost so much on defense. They had a really good defense last year that caused turnovers, that got a lot of sacks, and they're losing a ton of guys to the NFL. And right away that could get kind of bumpy. Like, that's why I think that Georgia Tech game is not a layup for Louisville at all. But the rest of it, they got Murray State, Indiana, Boston College, at NC State. They do play Notre Dame in Louisville, at Pitt, bye week, Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia all at home, at Miami, and then they finish up with Kentucky at home. Like, they have 4 of their last 5 games are at home too.
Yeah.
Like, this is a team I do think that can they're one of those teams that could be 10-2 and ranked like number 11 in the country, but in reality, they're probably like number 35 in the country. Yeah. They just overachieve based on their schedule, but I still think it's a good game. I think Jeff Brom's a really good hire for them. I think they're verging on overrated a little bit right now.
I got them at number 6, same as you, but I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I can see them being an underdog in this conference. I think Jeff Brom bringing in Jack Plummer, I think that's going to be great for them. They kind of rebuilt a little bit on the offensive front and in their wide receiver room. I think they got some talent in there. I think they also got some talent at their secondary and linebacker positions. We keep harping on schedule with Louisville, but sorry for all my native Kentucky people, Louisville, I can never pronounce it right. I think that they brought in enough transfers on the defensive and offensive side of the ball. I think they can be really good. They still got 6 returning starters on that defense, so I think they can build a good foundation there. It's really all going to depend on play calling and how Jack Plummer can do at quarterback.
Yeah. Look, if there's a team that could be a TCU-like team, I think I've seen them mentioned as a team that could do that. Look, they don't play Clemson, Florida State, or North Carolina. Yeah. Like, they're going to be favored in most games they play. I think some of their losses, I think they could have a bumpier start than usual. Miami was my number 5. Do you have a different number 5?
At my number 5, I did have NC State.
My number 4.
I think NC State, we saw the coordinator change. I think that Brendan Armstrong coming in, I think that can really change the dynamic of their offense. They underperformed is probably an understatement. They just weren't good offensively last year, and I hate that because I love Devin Leary as a quarterback. I think they could have done something real special with him. But I think changing up this offense, I think that's the only thing I think that's going to be the only thing they need. Defensively, I love what they do defensively. They're always solid. They're very fundamental. If they can put together some sort of offense, I think they can be really good.
Yeah, I smashed this over 6.5, man. Like, I just think that this team, like, if I get to buy low on NC State, like, when they were, well, I don't know if it was like 9.5 last year. That's when I'm just going to pull back a little bit because NC State doesn't recruit at a high enough level. But, man, getting Tim Beck going and taking the job at Coastal Carolina to me was almost a blessing in disguise because now you get Robert Anae at offensive coordinator, Brendan Armstrong, who I think you could see the version from 2 years ago. And then not to mention, like, Peyton Wilson coming back on defense. Like, I just think that this defense is just going to be really good. It always is. Like, to me, 6.5 is just an easy number. You start off at UConn. That's probably a win. Notre Dame at home. It's winnable, even though you're probably going to be underdogs in that game. VMI at Virginia. A couple more wins I think they can get. Louisville, Marshall, at Duke, bye week. Clemson, Miami, at Wake Forest, at Virginia Tech. And then, of course, you finish up with the rivalry game against North Carolina. I think they're only going to be clear underdogs to me in just a couple of games, and that's Clemson and Notre Dame. And the thing with both of those is you get them at home. Like, Raleigh is a really tough place to play. I just think that this team getting to 7-5 to me almost feels like a layup. Like, it feels like cheating. And, having them at my number 4 team in the ACC rankings, I think there's a big conversation to be had about NC State and Louisville. like who's going to finish that 4th or 5th spot. And that's why I think that game is just so crucial. And you get it so early in the year, and it's a Friday game. Like it's the second straight Friday game for Louisville. So that Louisville, or for NC State, excuse me. So that NC State Louisville game is just going to be pivotal early in the season to see who could finish like 4th or 5th in the ACC. You got number 4?
You're not gonna like my number 4. All right, give me Duke at number 4.
All right, we've discussed them enough. Number 3, I think our number 3 is both the same. Is it North Carolina?
Is North Carolina.
Look, this offense is if I think there's a chance it's still the same. I will say Phil Longo was a good offensive coordinator. He's now at Wisconsin. Chip Lindsey comes in, and he's had some ups and downs as a play caller, but if you cannot screw Drake May up, man. Like they do lose Josh Downs, but Georgia Tech fans will tell you how good Nate McCollum is. They get him. They get a key wide receiver transfer from Kent State. Their offense should still be good. Are they going to be physical enough on the lines of scrimmage, and is their defense going to be good enough? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, they can't give up 40-plus sacks like they did last year. I know we're going to talk about them losing Josh Downs and that wide receiver room. If that offensive line crew can hold up, I think this offense could be good enough to overcome a lot of defensive efficiencies they got. With that being said,
win totals at 8.5, by the way.
8.5, give me the over because I think that offense can get them 9 games. Defensively, it can't be much worse than what it was last year, right? You got to hold out on that. and that's what scares me about this team. Like, we'd be talking about this team in the same fashion that we talk about Florida State and Clemson. They have the quarterback to be able to do that.
They have talent on defense. Like Cedric Gray was a guy I voted first team All ACC this week. Like you see the numbers he puts up, that he's good. They have recruited well at these spots. Maybe it was a coaching thing. I don't know. You know.
Well, now they got Gene Chizik in there. I mean,
they had him last year.
But with that being said, I don't think it could get much worse. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think the only way is up from here, right? You got to hold out on that.
Yeah. If they didn't have Drake May, the 3rd spot in the ACC would be chaos.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of going to them by default. Like it could be NC State, Louisville, it could be Miami. Like I don't know. It's just if they have the best quarterback, probably the 2nd best quarterback in the country, if you ask me. So
yeah,
probably go over just because they don't have to play Florida State. Remember that. Hey, we get a rematch of that App State game. By the way, that was one of our favorite games last year. They come to Carolina this year, and then they get a really weird home game against Minnesota that I kind of forgot existed till right now. So. I guess let's talk about the big uglies. Number 2, I've got Clemson. I think this is going to be a really, really, really close race. Yeah. I'll talk about the things I like about Clemson first. Getting Garrett Riley to me was a home run. I didn't think that had that in him because he is I don't take from the transfer portal. I hire my own guys on offense that have been here for a million years, and I think that worked to their detriment. But going out and paying up for Garrett Riley is absolutely huge. Now, offensively, I think the offensive line returns starters. I don't know that it was that good to begin with. I don't think it's terrible, but I just don't think it's not one of the ACC's best, in my opinion. Will Shipley, I think, is phenomenal. I think Phil Moffitt is also phenomenal. I think the running game could be really good. Do they have the outside receivers? That's been a question. It used to not be a question. Remember when it was Mike Williams and T. Higgins and
even Sammy Watkins back in the day? Like they had receivers, man.
Now it's just been. I think Bo Collins is pretty good. Antonio Williams has talent.
Yeah,
I just like somebody's got to emerge, and I think at least with Riley coming in, you have can he coach those guys up to where they can be vital parts of the offense? You lose Miles Murphy and Brian Brazil on the defensive line, but you still have Tyler Davis. Xavier Thomas is still there. Like I don't know if that's a good or bad thing at this point. I think they have the best pair of linebackers in the country, Jeremiah Trotter and Barrett Carter. And I think their secondary has a lot of talent. Nate Wiggins, Andrew Makuba, like their defense is still going to be good.
Their defense is still going to be one of the best in the country.
And, I don't think their schedule is just incredibly tough. Like at Duke, they're 2 touchdown favorites on the road against everybody's favorite ACC team. Charleston Southern, win. Florida Atlantic, win. And then you get Florida State at home. If you win that, they're heavy favorites to at least make the ACC title game because at Syracuse, they're going to be big favorites. Now, they've lost at Syracuse before, and they struggle with them constantly. So I don't think that's a gimme, even though I do think Syracuse takes a step back. Wake Forest, I don't think is going to be the same caliber of team, and they get them in Clemson. On the road at Miami, they've owned Miami for like a decade. Until Miami bows up and plays Clemson tough, they're going to have to show it. I think at NC State, being sandwiched in between the Miami game and then a home game against Notre Dame, that is a tricky spot. I think it's one Clemson fans better be careful of. And then, you face Georgia Tech, North Carolina at home, and then they go on the road at South Carolina. Like, it's not like the easiest schedule in the world because I think November can be tough, but
there's not enough haymakers there to make me worried. Do you know what I mean?
There's not their win totals at 9.5. Give me the over.
Yeah.
I think this is a good team. I don't think they're a national title team though.
I think they are a potential playoff contender for sure. It's really just going to depend on what Garrett Riley can do with those wide receivers. I think Cade Klubnik, I think he has the talent to be really, really good. We already know who Will Shipley is and how he's just dynamic with the ball in his hands. Defensively, there's not a question. I don't think they have any questions defensively, like whatsoever. Linebacker, they're set. Secondary, they're set. D-line, they're set. One thing about Dabo, he's going to get the best out of his defense at all times. It's really just going to depend on Garrett Riley. Is he going to be enough to get Clemson back to the top of the college football world?
Yep. To me, it comes down if they can get good receiver production and Cade Klubnik is the guy, this team can make the playoffs.
Yep,
but
I agree with
all
you.
right, I voted them first in my ACC ballot this week. I picked them to win the conference. I'll let you take this one though. Florida State, go.
I would just like to sit here and say I was higher on Florida State when Jackson wasn't. I think that it's all going to come to fruition this year. But, yeah, you got Jordan Travis, you got Trey Benson, you got Johnny Wilson. I think the sky's the limit for this Florida State team. I really do. And it's crazy how they've done it through the transfer portal. They haven't even done it through high school recruiting like that.
They're an interesting case study this year because I've had the long-held belief that you have to recruit elitely at a high school, or I don't know if that's a word, but you have to recruit at a high level in high school.
Out of high school, yeah.
They've been pretty good. Like Hakeem Williams is a 5-star receiver. They've got some talent there, but they're built through the portal. Like if they can make the playoff or make the national championship game, maybe it changes how teams do things. I'm interested to see.
Yeah, I am too. But also on that defensive end, I love Jared Verse. I think he's going to be one of, if not the best defensive player in the country. But you're losing guys like Jamie Robinson. You're losing Robert Cooper. They're going to have to play a lot better against the run. I think they ranked 11th in the ACC against the run.
In the country.
Yeah, like it's just not that good. They're really going to have to buy in. They're going to have to hunker down. They're going to have to really control the tempo of the game. And I think they can do that defensively. Offensively, I think they have playmakers all over the place. I think they have a potential Heisman contender. I got this team making the college football playoff.
Oh, well. Look, I think offensively this team is dynamite. One guy you didn't mention was Michigan State transfer Keon Coleman, who was already a good receiver there, and their offense wasn't even good. Like and Jaheim Bell coming in from South Carolina, the tight end. I also think this could be Florida State's best offensive line. And man, we have killed them over and over and over again the past few years about their offensive line. But this one, I don't think it's an elite unit like a Georgia or a Michigan or something. But I do think it's a good one. Their secondary could be just nasty. Getting Ventrell Cypress over from Virginia. He was the number one corner. He's one of the top defensive players in the whole portal. You're adding him to an already pretty good secondary. Look, their linebackers, Kalen DeLoach is really good. Look, I think my bold prediction is no ACC team makes the playoff because I think I already talked about LSU's my pick to win the SEC and get to the playoff. I think they beat Florida State. I think Florida State loses that first matchup against Clemson. I think going on the road and beating them in that environment will be tough. I do think they win the rematch. I think Florida State does win the ACC and gets to the Orange Bowl. I think they finish 11-2. I just think that LSU is a better team. I'm trying to find the words to say, but LSU to me is just a better team. And then when you have to go face to me a team of equal caliber, I'm going to give it to the home team. I just don't think Florida State is clearly better enough than Clemson this year, where I'm going to say they can go on the road in an environment that's going to be absolutely insane. Now, to that degree, I think Clemson loses 2 games too. I think they'll lose to Florida State in the title game. I think Clemson loses somewhere, and I actually think it's going to be at NC State. I think they'll go on the road and lose that game in kind of an upset spot. But that's our predicted finish. Now, kind of get to some superlatives as we start wrapping the show up. We're not going to go 2 hours this time. We we're not going to keep everybody that long. We know everybody ain't got 2 hours of their day, but I just gave you my bold prediction. I think the ACC title or the ACC does not produce a playoff team. Do you have a bold prediction?
I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I think Florida State goes undefeated this year. I think they can do it. I think that LSU game is really going to be a staple point for them. And I think LSU could be on par with a Clemson team. Like roster for roster, LSU is up there. If they can beat LSU, I think they can beat Clemson. Give me Florida State going undefeated.
Oh, and I'm not saying they can't beat Clemson. Whenever I have a hard time choosing a winner in the game, I just defer to the road team, especially if it's a decisive road environment. Like Clemson is a tough environment. ACC Offensive Player of the Year, it came down to two people for me. It was either going to be Drake May or Jordan Travis. I think Drake May is a better NFL prospect. I think Jordan Travis, I just think he's going to put up insane numbers this year. And I think the team's success is going to put him over the top.
And I understand that logic completely. I think team success will play a part in that. But I do think Drake May can still put a season together where you can still look at him and say he's still the ACC best offensive player.
Yeah. Defensive Player of the Year, I know we differ on this one. I voted for Jeremiah Trotter. I think he is an outstanding linebacker. I do think Jared Verse is obviously going to be up there. I think Peyton Wilson of NC State is a dark horse for this as well. I just think Trotter is just an all-around beast of a linebacker. Give me him.
Give me Jared Verse. I love his game. I love his skill set. I think he can go and set records at Florida State this year. He's going to be really, really good. I think when you look at Florida State, you're going to really look for consistency, and I think he's going to be the most consistent player on that defense this year.
Yep. Most overrated team. I'm not going to keep killing him. It's Duke.
I got Clemson. I really do.
Overrated how? In like a national title sense, or because you've got to make in the ACC title game?
Yeah, overrated in the sense of Garrett Riley is – they're talking about Clemson can win a national title right now. I think there's still a lot of questions at wide receiver. I don't know if they have a proven guy. Yeah, you got the quarterback. Yeah, you got the running back. But do you have proven weapons on the outside that can win you games whenever you play a team like an Ohio State or you go against a defense like Georgia or even a team like Alabama? Are they going to be able to air the ball out? Are they going to be able to protect Cade Klubnik? I'm not sure. I'm not ready to say that I expect them to win a national title. I don't think they can make the national title game. I don't even think they can beat Florida State. I think that let me rephrase that. I think that Clemson being Clemson, I think roster-wise, they're still one of the best rosters in the country, but I don't think this move with Garrett Riley as the new offensive coordinator is just going to make them a national title contender.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost with you there. I'm not.
It's not overrated in the sense that I don't think they'll be good, and everybody thinks that they're just going to be great. It's just that it's slim pickings with them.
I'll let you go for most underrated, then I'll wrap us up.
Underrated, give me Louisville. I really think that Louisville, if all the cards align right, they can get enough production out of their offense. If their schedule is a little bit of a slacker like we think it is, I think they could really make an ACC.
You told me Louisville is 10-2 and in the ACC title game, but it's not crazy. It's really not crazy because I don't know. I'm not going to go all the scenarios I made, but I do see what you're saying there, and the cards could be in the deck for the Cards. You know, my most underrated team, it's NC State. I think this team is just getting slept on again. They're not going to the playoff. I don't even think they make the ACC.
They broke my heart so bad last year. I don't want nothing to do with them this year.
Yeah, Dave Doran is one of the most underrated coaches in the country. I just think you know what you're going to get. I love getting Robert Anae as our offensive coordinator and Brennan Armstrong at quarterback. I think that's a big step up from Tim Beck, who's now at Coastal Carolina. So I just think NC State's a team that's going to pull some upsets this year.
That's fair.
That's going to do it for the ACC show, man. We're 2 Power 5 conferences down. We've got 3 to go, Big 10, Big 12, and, of course, everybody's favorite conference, the Pac-12, which is probably about to be deceased. So it could be our last Pac-12 show ever.
Looking like the Pac-11 right now. I mean,
it'd be the Pac-9 because USC and UCLA out the door.
Exactly.
We're dipping below double digits there, but appreciate everybody coming in here and watching. Be sure and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me and Kobe on social media, and go check out allyellowjackets.com for all your Georgia Tech needs. I got you covered over there. Fall camp's coming. More content's on the way. I promise. I'm just going to be churning it out like crazy. Can't wait for the season to start. Kobe, you got any last words, man?
We're getting closer and closer, brother. I can smell it.
Hey, 5 weeks from tonight, we will be getting ready to watch Utah and Florida.
I
5 more
can't
weeks.
wait, man.
Five
I can't
more.
wait. It's going to be awesome. I think this year we're going to be really in for a good college football season before a lot of changes are made. This is going to be one of the last years that things are going to look similar. You know what I mean?
That's going to do it for us. Like I said, be sure to check all that stuff out. We will be back next week for another show. But this is Jackson Caudill. That's Kobe Reed, and we are out.